good morning, and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for joining us this month. This month, we're all about campaign attribution. So let's get started and give you an overview of what today will be all about. So the agenda is the same as advertised, but just rearranged ever so slightly in sequencing. So we'll cover the same things, but just move them around a bit for you. So first thing we want to do is understand different attribution models and what they could look like within your organization. Then also looking at how Eloqua can present some of that information back to you by way of dashboards and also looking at insight. Understanding the role of UTM values, both in form and attributes, and how they work, and give you some ideas on what they could look like. Chances are most of you kind of already have those in place. It would just be a matter of then connecting that information through to Eloqua to capture from your digital marketing. We'll then have a little bit closer look at campaign level reporting as well, versus the overview, which is covered there in point 2. And then also have a look at what's new and what's coming. We'll touch on what's new, but in relation to what's coming, we don't have any release details yet for the August release of Eloqua. So as soon as we do, we'll let you know what's coming up. My name is Derek Bell. I'll be your host for today, walking you through these points, and I'm supported by Jason O'Donnell, our account director, and also Matt Hemsley, our marketing manager, who's based in Melbourne at the moment due to travel restrictions. So thank you, Matt, for joining us. And for the first time, we're absolutely delighted to have a guest with us. And Trisha is from Victoria University and has been working with Marketing Cube for, is it almost 12 months? I think it's almost 12 months. And but they've been an Eloqua client for longer than that. And so what we wanted to talk about today was some of the great work that Victoria University have done and some of the benefits that they've seen as a result of attribution and really tightening that model up within their organization. So Trisha will join us shortly to explain some of those for you. So thanks again, Trisha, and thank you, Victoria University, for joining us today. When people register, or when customers register for the session, we enable you to present or ask a question. There's always a couple, and this month is one from Kath, based in Sydney. Now, Kath asked the question, and this is a great question, actually, I thought. So the Eloqua dashboard for database health refers to active contacts. What does that actually mean? That's a really good point. So we managed to find the question, and the question is actually found in the Help Center. So anyone that's been working with me for a little while knows what a proponent of the Help Center I am. So an active contact has any of the following activities: an email open, an email click through, form submission, or page view. And the metric does exclude unreachable contacts, so unsubscribes or hard bounces, etc. Now, the only other piece of information missing from that explanation is the time frame. So when you look at the dashboard within Eloqua and it talks of active contacts, somewhere on that screen, depending on which report or which dashboard you're looking at, will be a time frame, maybe the last 7 days, last 30 days, etc. So whatever the time frame is that it's referring to, that is the overlay to put onto that particular piece of information. So thank you, Kath, for submitting that question. Let's see if Kath's with us today, so thank you, Kath. And this one is from Kimberly in far north Queensland. I spoke with Kimberly yesterday to try and clarify a little bit in relation to this question. And so the answer to Kimberly's question is a yes. And the yes is, but in connection with cookies. So Kimberly had a very specific reason for asking that question, which is a little bit sort of outside the scope of what we would cover here today. So I talked to her yesterday about that. But yeah, so the IP address is captured. And remember, Eloqua has a construct of a known contact and an unknown contact. So an unknown contact is somebody that's not sitting in your database today with an email address. However, if they are floating over your website where you've got the Eloqua tracking script installed, then that information is captured a lot. So there's cookies and IP addresses working together that eventually, should that person disclose who they are via a form submission, then that information is collected and joined together. So the answer is a yes, but with a slight caveat. Alrighty, so let's dive straight in. We want to get through a few of these models and then have some time for Trish to share a bit about what's happening at Victoria University. So there's lots of thought, lots of discussion. You only have to do a little bit of Googling and you'll see there's a million opinions in relation to attribution models. So we've done the same thing that you've probably done. And then we start to sit back and we realize that when you think about the buyer's journey today, that there really is a new normal, and the new normal is probably unpredictability. And so what we want to try and do is track where possible. And of course, we can only do that within the digital realms, largely speaking, where people are coming from. And once they access information that you're providing them, trying to make sure we stamp that source information onto the contact. And you can see by this journey that it's kind of all over the shop. And I don't know about you, but I've done a little bit more online shopping over the last 3 or 4 months than I've probably ever done in my entire life. And yeah, I'd love to see. And of course, my advertising that's appearing now in front of me is driving me crazy. But that's okay. That's what we're here to do, right? And I must admit, some of that advertising has driven me to purchase more. So that's a good thing. So part of that process, and something that we won't dive into too much today, but I just sort of wanted to raise with you as a little bit of a thought process, is looking at some of those micro moments that can actually matter and make a difference. And part of that is trying to understand where people are in the process. And you could argue that some of this lead source information could in fact help this process. So we'll set that aside and leave that for discussion for another day. But I just wanted to kind of present that and get you thinking a little bit about that. All right, so a person's exposure to your brand can take place over time. And I think that's what those last 2 slides, very adequately talk about. But at what point should you apply attribution? And the answer to that question is largely going to be unique for every, or not maybe unique, but it will be different for every organization. So if we kind of break it down into 4 separate areas that largely indicate touch points, it would be first touch, that very first time a person has any engagement or interaction with your organization. At some point, a lead is created. And so in that scenario I just talked about in relation with Kimberly from Far North Queensland, that we capture the IP address, etc., and use cookies and those sorts of things, but we don't really know who they are at that point. They're really just zeros and ones to us at that point. It's at that point of the lead creation that attribution is something that you may want to apply, and we certainly encourage you to do that. Now, you may deem that the assignment of attribution perhaps happens later in the process. Maybe it happens around the opportunity creation, or at the very end of the process when the opportunity is closed and won. Now, for some organizations, if you were selling, let's choose one of my online shopping examples over the last 4 months. If you're buying something from Bonds, some new trackies, so you could sit at home in nice new trackies while working hard. I'm wearing jeans today, just quietly. So maybe it's right then at that closed won opportunity. What did they click on? What did they do right before they popped everything in the basket and closed? So that's a more B2C example. Now, if you've got a much longer selling cycle, like many of you do that are on the call with us today, this becomes a little bit more of a discussion that needs to be had in a bit more detail. So what I wanted to do now was try and present to you some of the various models that you will find popularly discussed as you start to cruise around the internet and have a little bit of a look at what's on offer. So the concept of first touch attribution is fairly common. It's not a new concept, and it's possibly one of the easiest models for you to set up as well. It doesn't really involve a lot of analysis. It's pretty simple to track and focus, and focuses really on demand distribution rather than weight distribution. Now, there can be some pros and cons to this, and so cons to this one could be that the model is potentially prone to error. It really emphasizes just the beginning of the customer journey, which only tells you obviously part of the story. But it really does depend on what your objectives are as an organization and what you think is going to work best for your reporting needs and for your business as a whole. Now, first touch attribution makes it difficult to optimize your marketing process though, because you can't say for sure what really led a customer to make a purchase. A prospect usually goes through multiple touch points before converting, and those touch points that made an impact, like the email newsletter, should be further optimized to potentially increase conversion rates. So there's things that need to be thought through in a little bit more detail. So when should you use this model? What's the best application potentially? So the first touch attribution model helps to measure which top of funnel marketing campaigns are most effective. So really at that very top end of the scenario. It doesn't give you the complete picture, but it can help you optimize your lead generation processes. So that last point, it really can help you optimize your lead gen processes is really the focus potentially of first touch, really helping you understand where those leads are coming from. Let's have a look at the next one. So last touch, right? So now we head to the other direction of the exercise. So it really helps to understand the process as a whole, but instead of measuring where the lead first came in contact with your business, as it says here, it really attributes the whole sales process to the last touch. So it's the end of the marketing funnel. So last touch is usually the default setting. In most attribution models, GA also uses it as a default attribution model. And this model focuses on what drove a lead to convert and ignores everything that came before the conversion. Now, of course, with a bunch of marketers on today's webinar, ignoring everything that came before the conversion is probably a little bit of a bugbear, right? I mean, obviously we work hard at all points of that process, but it really comes down to what's your objective for the lead attribution. In the communications that we shared with you before coming on today, in our emails, etc., we talked about the concept of advertising budgets and where do I assign my advertising budgets. One could argue that maybe the first touch model is the better one to do that, because it's really going to help you understand where people are coming from social channels, whatever it may be, wherever you're posting links that drive people to landing pages where you may then convert them with a form. So more to be thought through there. Okay, so next one is linear attribution. So it's really everything from the first touch, lead creation, opportunity creation, and customer closing are all treated equally. It's really much the same. So if we look at it something like this, it's applying the same value across each of those and assigning them equally. I don't know, as I sort of looked at this one in a bit more detail, I'm like, well, I'm not sure all things are equal necessarily. It's a little bit more complex than that. But again, it comes back to what's your objective to measuring attribution and what are you actually trying to achieve from an attribution point of view. Now, time decay, this is an interesting one. So the time decay attribution model gives more significance to the touch points that are closer to where the conversion occurred than the top of funnel. So it isn't foolproof. None of these processes are foolproof, I should point out. But perhaps a lead interacted with your ad and signed up for a demo and then later purchased your product through a link in a blog post. Now, should the blog content receive more content than the ad or the demo? Most likely not. So you've got to think that one through. Now, pros. Often the touch points closest to the point of conversion had the most weight because maybe it's the ones that you physically know about. You've also got to think about what's happening from the human point of view of the sales team and the information they have available to them in the CRM. Does marketing feed to them the information so they see it on screen to understand lead source? What if the salesperson is involved in their own selling efforts, and it's through their involvement that they arrive into the platform? The lead makes its way into the CRM platform. There may have been some digital advertising, there may have been some interaction, but if the person is not physically in the system, their source of getting into your CRM system was through a human, namely the salesperson. So it's never going to be perfect. Some of the cons, I suppose, from time decay is that you're devaluing the first touch might not always be the right thing to do, but depending on the circumstances, the first touch point may have played an important role in the conversion. So more thought process needed there. So these two focusing on first touch, but then more credit being applied as you move towards the opportunity creation portion of the exercise. The next one is U-shape. This sounds a little bit like a pandemic recovery. U-shape, V-shape, all those sorts of fun things. All right, so the U-shaped attribution model gives credit to 3 main touch points. It credits 40% to the first and last touch and attributes 20% to the middle point. And that's what you're seeing there, something like that. Unlike the first and last touch attribution models that place importance on just one aspect of the analysis, the U-shaped model gives equal importance to both values. So the first point of interaction of a lead with a business is just as important as when the lead converts. And this model helps you optimize these channels evenly. Now, there are some cons, of course, as there are with each of them. There are times when the first or last touch point isn't as important. So when doing analysis, you should always check if the first touch is as important as the last point. And so the only way you're really going to be able to do that is by looking at the data, and we'll have a look at some examples of how you can extract that information from Eloqua and then do a little bit of comparisons in how that information is visible. Alrighty, so at that juncture, what I'd like to do is, Trish, I'm just going to give you some audio so that you can talk. So welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Derek. By way of introduction, everyone, and hello, everyone. I'm Trisha. So I'm the Marketing Automation Manager over here at Victoria University. So my team is responsible for Eloqua. So our focus is primarily our domestic audience. So our primary objective is driving new student applications.
Beautiful. Thank you, Trish. What I may do is we've got Matt on the line as well, who's been working very closely with you. So Matt and Trish have been working together to sort of work out what's the neatest way to present some sort of summary to members of the user group today in relation to the activities that Victoria University have been up to. So what we've done here is broken them down into sort of 3 areas with a few subpoints. So Trish and Matt, or Trish, at this point, I may hand over to you and see if you can walk us through these points. Now, because what we may do is let you go through that process, but I imagine there may be some questions as well. So, so Matt, maybe if you can keep an eye on the Q&A while Trish is talking us through these various points.
Thanks, Derek. So with our attribution model, so what I want to walk through is the reasons as to why we did it, what were our core objectives, and how did we get there. So our top reasons were we were unable to show ROI. So what we really wanted to understand is what were our best performing channels and really gauge as to what were our best performing campaigns. We were going through a lot of reporting inefficiency. So it was difficult for us and quite complex for us to report on any post-campaign activities. So we used to use a mix of out of the box and segments to create our reports. It was quite a convoluted process. And data quality, which I think was a big one. So, you know, like any medium to larger organizations, our data is scattered across multiple source systems. So what we really wanted to do was bring it all together in Eloqua for reporting, so we can all have one single source of truth. Now on to our objectives. So our primary objectives was, again, to have like a centralized reporting. So really, again, use Eloqua as a source of truth for our marketing performance data, so including our customer conversion metrics. Visualize performance. So, you know, have an easily accessible reporting source with charts, you know, with dashboards, with tables. That would be clearly understood by non-marketers, and not just people in my team, but, you know, outside our main stakeholders, so they can see how we are performing as well. Campaign planning. So ultimately what we really wanted to understand, again, is what channels were performing best in driving conversions, so we can allocate budgets, allocate resources, so we know, okay, you know, this is what was performing, this is where we should be focusing on, this is not so, you know, performing so much, so maybe that's not a big priority for us at this moment. I know Derek just touched on it previously, but our lead conversion attribution model is associates a last known source before the form submission. So this sort of helped us understand, you know, what marketing channels were driving lead conversions. So now for like our key like steps, you know, as to how we got there. So first and foremost, like we defined the vision. So it was really not about, you know, achieving, you know, why, but how, but more about like, you know, what we wanted to achieve. So really picturing, you know, like an ideal scenario as to what we really wanted to report on, which would be quick and accurate. We wanted to go beyond the high level, top funnel metrics like open rates and page views, etc., but really like focus on key channel metrics like channel conversion, lead to enrollment rates, conversion rates by audience, and campaigns. And we sort of like tied it all down in a three-way process. Like we covered campaigns, channels, and audiences. There is an overlap between the three, but those were like our three core areas of focus. Then really important, is that we got input, from our key teams, that we work really closely with. So, as a marketing automation team, like we don't just work in silo, like we work really closely, with our paid media team or with our web team. So it's really important to get that input from them, just to see what would they find valuable as well. So it's, the second step for us was really focusing on our platform integration. So what data is feeding into Eloqua. So we currently use Oracle Sales Cloud and Engagement Cloud as our primary CRMs. So the data is integrated in Eloqua. So we are able to get information like, application data, enrollment data, and offers. So that's feeding back into Eloqua. So, and one key sort of like, objective for us, in a process for us with this platform integration was that, we wanted to actually see with the data coming in, like, are there any kind of inaccuracies or inefficiencies? So, like this really sort of helped, this project actually really helped us identify any kind of issues we have with integration. So, if as an example, when we do a report in Eloqua and if there are data inconsistencies, between what we have, in Eloqua with what we have in Service Cloud, then we can actually go in, and fix these issues. The third, and it's actually the easiest, simplest, but really the most important step for us was defining our UTM parameters. So, in the past, we'd always been capturing UTM values, so via hidden fields in our form submissions. But what we really had to do is, do some key process improvement and really tighten the process to improve our data hygiene. So really like the big thing for us was defining, what our UTM parameters were, and, like, really trying to understand, what we were capturing, what we were defining. And then to optimize the process, I think what we did was build a UTM generator. It's quite simple. It's literally a spreadsheet, but it was super effective for us as a process improvement. So it's a spreadsheet with drop down. We have sources, we have campaign and medium. So it automatically generates a link with all your required parameters. So the kind of idea was that anyone can go in there and it can create a link that points to your video asset, like a landing page or a web page. So yes, that was again another big thing for us, was again getting that input from teams like our paid media team and web team. So so they can use it in their ads, they can use it in behind buttons, for the website. I think what I really sort of want to call out, because I think it's a common issue faced by most organizations, is the challenge we have with cross-domain tracking. So a challenge we really faced with cross-domain tracking was it's quite well and good. It's really great, when someone, clicks and goes to a landing page from an Instagram ad and, and submits their details. It's quite easy for us to track that. But a big issue that we have quite often is when someone gets to a page from the ad and then goes around the website and navigates around, visits multiple pages and then decides to submit a form. So what happens then is our UTM parameters in the UTM gets lost and we can't really identify where they came from. So what we did, we worked really closely with Marketing Cube and our web team to implement a solution where those UTM values are stored for each user using cookies. So this way, we can easily identify, where they end up coming from when they do ultimately, end up submitting a form. So we can see, okay, they've come in from this source, even though they've gone around the website, visited multiple pages before submission. And the last key step for us was really like this reporting and dashboard framework. So it was really important as a final step for us, which is visualizing performance. So the whole reason why we did what we did and why we did this project is visualizing, what the reporting and what our dashboards would look like. We really wanted to create, reports that is easy to access and really shows our full funnel marketing performance, easy to understand, again, by our key stakeholders. So we use these insights that we got, from this attribution project, to build dashboards and custom reports, such as, which, and some of the things like we did, and it was easy for us to do now with this, was things like comparing month to month, comparing year to year. So again, that was a key thing for us, a key step for us. So I would like to sort of conclude by saying that this project, this process, it requires continuous tweaking and maintenance, and we really haven't arrived at the finished article yet. And as Derek mentioned, we, as in the education industry, it is a longer sales cycle. So it'll take us a little bit of time to see full value of what we have done. But what I can say is now we've got full visibility on our marketing performance, including key things like ROI. So, which is again a huge improvement from where we were 6 months ago, and I can really see, with our attribution modeling and with our, lead sources, if all this being captured as to, how much of it's going to improve 6 months down the line. So it's a work in progress, but we can really see, the improvement we've made, and we've really come leaps and bounds with this.
Wow, thank you, Trish. You're a rock star. Thank you so much. And obviously there's a big team at Victoria University that worked on this project, right? So we should give a shout out to the team as well.
Thanks, Derek. A special shout out to you guys and Matt as well for helping us through this.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Now, there are a few questions that have popped through, but what I might do is maybe Matt can help us look at those questions. And what I'm going to do is throw up a poll so people can have a little look at that. And maybe if they do have any questions, let's give ourselves 60 seconds or so to have a look at that question. And if you can answer that for us, that'd be great. And Matt, do you want to have a look at some of those questions? Do you want to unmute yourself and maybe help with some of those?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Derek. So yeah, the first question we've got coming here from Jared. And he asks, does storing those UTM parameters per user work if they visit subdomains, technically leaving the main site? So yeah, short answer to that is yes. I think as Trisha said, it was a sort of an issue we identified quite early on in the process. And the solution we came up with is quite a technical one, which is a bit beyond me. And it was Kartik, our lead technical person at Marketing Cube, that helped implement that along with the web team at Victoria University. But it basically does involve cookies, as Trish said. So when somebody arrives at the site with those UTM parameters in the URL, the cookies capture what that is. So if somebody does go to a different subdomain, effectively leaving that main site, those UTM parameters are stored on the cookie. So when they do then return to a page that does have a form with hidden form fields for the UTM values, they are then submitted as part of the form. Yeah, and then we have another question from Malcolm. So it says, out of interest, are you storing the campaign actions in CDOs in Eloqua? Yeah, so it's actually a bit of a combination of both, Malcolm. So what we're storing on the contact, we're storing first source and last source, along with first medium and first campaign. So basically how that works is if somebody doesn't have a first source, medium, campaign, then that is populated in the hidden field and stored on the contact. If they do already have a first, medium source campaign, that is not updated, that's never modified. But then the last source, medium, and campaign is updated every time somebody submits the form. So that way we can report on sort of first conversion attribution and last conversion attribution. And then sort of referring back to your question, in addition to that, everything is stored on a CDO as well. So every conversion, all the UTM values are stored in the CDO. So that way it's actually sort of a bit future looking with that one. So right now we're looking at first and last conversion attribution, but at some point in the future, we'd also like to introduce multi-touch or perhaps some of those other models that Derek spoke about, Ushaped, for example. So yes, effectively storing it both on the contact and in CEOs in Eloqua.
And then a question from Kath and also from Andrew.
Yeah, so Kath's question, just wanted to clarify, was a UTM generated for each individual contact? So I think if I understand that question correctly, the UTM link is generated in the generator just for every every link that points to a landing page. So whether that is a button on a web page, button in an email or in a search ad. And then, so it's not specific to an individual, but then the UTM values that are captured are stored on the contact, so specifically on the individual. And then Andrew's question, how long did it take to put an attribution model in play? So it definitely varies from organization to organization. I can speak specifically with the work we did with VU. It's probably started the whole process about 6 months ago, but there is a lot to that process as Trish went through. So, you know, things like creating that UTM generator, actually having the discussion and putting the strategy and plan in place of what we want to report on, getting the input from various teams within the organization, and then obviously putting together the reports and dashboards in Eloqua Insights. So yeah, I think for VU, we started, I think, just before Christmas, didn't we, Trish? And I think we're at a point now where we've got a lot of that.
6 months, I'd say.
Yes, 6 months. So I've got a lot of that data now showing in reports and dashboards in Eloqua, but also, as Trish mentioned, you know, we'll come across perhaps inconsistencies in the data and stuff that we weren't expecting to see. So then that involves going back and checking integrations and making sure that they are working as we hope. So, and then also just to add to that, obviously Victoria University and many people on the call working for organizations do have long sales cycles. So if you can imagine a student looking to study a course, that's not a sort of decision that they make in a couple of weeks. That's over several months and even over a year or longer for some people. So by the time we actually see people, you know, that first conversion, perhaps downloading a study area guide, for example, and by the time we actually get to the point where they are enrolled and studying at the university, that could be a long time before you're sort of seeing the full value of that attribution model.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Trish and Matt, for doing that, and thanks very much for your questions, folks. Hopefully that was helpful. Let's have a look at those poll results and see what you came up with. So last touch seems to be the most popular response, then first touch, but probably around 38% of people doing none of the above. So look, it's an ongoing process, and as you see there, and I suppose two guys you credit, you know, you spent the last 4 months of that 6 months. You had Christmas in between, and then you had fires, floods, and pandemics. So maybe in a normal scenario, it could have happened a bit quicker. But well done on getting all that done. So what I want to do now is show you some of the mechanics, I suppose, of how that's done, and just to clarify, and this might help answer or cement your response there, Kath, or your question that you had. So what I've got in front of you right now is a standard Eloqua landing page URL. So you've got the enablement.marketingcube.com.au, and then you can see the remainder there is for one of our replays. So what we do is we take that URL and we drop that into our UTM generator, where we assign a whole set of different values. And what I've tried to do here is highlight a few bits and pieces to make it easier for you to understand. So it finishes off with group, and everything after the question mark, and this is not unique to Eloqua, by the way, so any URL you look at in your browser, everything after the question mark is all of the UTM stuff that's being captured. UTM source, and so in this case, this particular URL would have been dropped onto our website. So the website would have appeared as the lead source. The medium in this sense would be organic because they've just simply hit our website. We're not really, we can use GA to see where they came from a little bit before that, but it's organic from that point of view, that we've not specifically driven the person there via a campaign. And then the campaign in question is the replay. And so that information then flows through. So that's what will populate the 3 hidden fields sitting on the form once they get to that replay form. And that information is then, in our world, is stored on the contact, not onto a custom data object at this point. So we just keep it straight onto the contact. So how do we then take that URL? Because that's obviously a monster URL. Now, obviously, because it is a monster URL, if you're going to post it into a social channel, then you go ahead and use something like Bitly or something like that to reduce the size of that URL. Essentially, what you would need to do, certainly from a source point of view, is if you wanted to take that replay that we've got there of the user group, you would need to create 4 different URLs. So we take the base URL, which is the Eloqua landing page, then we use our UTM generator to assign lead sources, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the WordPress is just generically meaning your website, so whatever CMS you might be using. And so then that one would be considered our website. And the last one, of course, is Eloqua via email. That information, so you've now got essentially 5 slightly different URLs, but all of those URLs drive people to a single landing page with the Eloqua form on it. And that particular form is going to have some hidden fields in it. And those hidden fields, using a combination of things like query strings and field merges, they're pulled out of the URL at the point of submission. And then depending on what controls you have and how you've got it configured, and also probably depending on your attribution model, that data is then posted to the contact and or to a CDO, to Malcolm's point earlier. And that's in the example there from Trish at Victoria University. They also use the contact and custom data object together to hold some of that information. So what can that information look like? So this is an example from Marketing Cube, and this is looking at the last 30 days, just looking at lead source and medium information. And so for new contacts that have been created in the last 30 days, we can see the website is delivering with 16 new contacts, and we can see that there have been 7 that have come about through various Eloqua campaigns. Now, this dashboard is probably pretty boring for you guys because you have a lot more channels potentially running than we do, certainly across the university sector, you know, with strong social presences, etc. So you can imagine that lead source for many of your organizations that are doing a lot more volume marketing than we do at Marketing Cube. You would see things like Facebook, you would see LinkedIn, you would see Twitter, you would see a whole range of different values there. So that's just one example. Now that's a custom report that's built in Eloqua, and of course the team at Marketing Cube can assist you in building something like that, and it can obviously be personalized to whatever works best for your organization as well. So it was at this point that I just kind of wanted to bring you back and refresh you a little bit with this model, right? Given everything that we've just heard from Trish, understanding those different models and how all over the shop, I suppose, things are today in the way that people buy and the way that they transact. I just think that's a really powerful graphic, a really powerful image to really emphasize that point, that it's not a linear process. So one of the points that Matt made as well in relation to how we manage that data, and I think it was, let me just have a quick look. Where are you? Jared, from Jared, in relation to storing UTM parameters and how that works, etc. So a lot of that can tie into, remember here, when you're looking at fields and views, the default update logic and how that works, whether you always update if blank. So if you're looking at a last touch exercise, you would want to take that value and have that field always update. If you're looking at a first touch type of model, then you would only want to update if blank, so that that very first value is captured. So you've got everything you need. And of course, the team at Marketing Cube can assist you in that process if you start to get a little bit lost. So the next part of the exercise is, I've done it again. I do this every month. I always leave some lorem ipsum, don't I, in the slides. But anyway, so UTM values informs and understanding what they look like and how they can work. And so here's my details for you in lorem ipsum. So if you can read Latin, you're a rock star. But I meant to delete that. So lead source and lead medium are the 2 that we focus on. And I don't present this to you as the best solution, but it's the solution that we at Marketing Cube decided worked for us. So we use lead source, lead medium, and lead campaign together. But it's the lead source and lead medium that are fixed values. So they are essentially pick lists. Now, the thing that we also had to factor into that discussion process around lead source was there's obviously lead sources that the marketing team work with very specifically from a digital point of view, but there's also carbon-based behavior. I heard that. I mean, it's a bit of a buzzword, but I just think it's kind of cute. carbon-based as in human. Okay, that's us. So, non-digital. And this could be the sales team. So the sales team are out there doing their own thing on the telephone, meeting people, pressing the flesh, not shaking hands anymore, but doing elbow taps potentially. And that's how they meet people. And so you've got to provide in your lead source construct options that the CRM user, when they enter a contact or a lead into the CRM platform, that they can assign a lead source that makes sense to them. And it could be something as simple as own selling efforts, for example. So what we did is we had a fairly robust discussion and went through that process and came up with this list. Now, it might seem a little ridiculously extensive, but part of it was trying to break down what kind of worked for us and what we wanted to look at. So you'll see things, for instance, around LinkedIn. So with LinkedIn, we're in the habit of taking URLs occasionally and putting most of our content onto our company page. But we also occasionally will put things onto our personal profiles as well, usually blog posts, that sort of stuff, or even events, which would drive people straight to an Eloqua landing page. So we thought it would be really helpful to understand the difference that there is between how effective our company page is versus our personal profile. And just as an FYI, so far the personal profile seems to perform better than the company page. Now, we wouldn't have known that if we didn't do a little bit of lead source tracking using that UTM builder to build the URLs and to personalize them. So what I've tried to do there is look at some of the, as I call them, carbon-based, which are the ones in bold. So sometimes the list that you might have in the CRM for lead source, that drop-down list is going to be a little bit different potentially to the one that you have over in the marketing platform or that you're using in your UTM generator. Then when it came to medium, for us, we looked at this a bit harder, etc. And this is kind of where we came to in relation to what we saw as different mediums that we would be using to meet people. Just some examples. Then, of course, the lead campaign. Now, this part in our world may not be the same for you, but certainly in our world, we have the lead campaign construct as free text. So we just have a fairly standard way of abbreviating things and making sure that's reasonably consistent. And so again, that will give the CRM user or the marketing team from a reporting point of view, a bit of an idea as to what's going to work best for them as they go through that process. So one more poll for you. And just wanted to get a little bit of an idea. Do you plan to build a model yourself? And do you see that as something that, you know what I did? I apologize. I prepared this, but I didn't actually build out the poll in Zoom, so no poll. But maybe if you could use the chat function and just give me a yes or a no through the chat function, that would be ideal, just to get a little bit of a feel to understand. Okay. All right, cool. Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks, Mohammed. Jasmine, Alexandra, no, okay. Would like to explore attribution, sure. Okay, thank you, Jared. Thank you, Kath. Yep, understand, Fiona, totally understand. Look, I suppose the key thing with any of these things, as you know, for those of you that attend the user group on a regular basis, part of what we're trying to do, most of the topics that we arrive at each month come about through our discussions with you, our customers. And we see that there's, we look at people like VU who've done such a great job, as have other customers when it comes to attribution. But there are others that are really trying to understand and figure out how they can do that. And as is always the point, please always feel free to reach out to us, whether it's to myself or to Adrian or Jason or Matt or whoever. We'd love to take the time to sit with you and talk about this in a bit more detail. Melanie, yeah, really good point. I think it's definitely something to explore. And so maybe then the onus is on us to help you a little bit further with that. So we'll definitely do that. All right. So the next part was to give you an idea now to come down to a campaign level and look at what that might look like within the platform. So what I've done is built out a couple of reports, which I'll jump into here at the moment. But as with any reports that you start to play with in Insight, generally the best way to do it is to find a report in Insight that just about answers all of the questions that you have, but by using the custom report capability, you can then go a little bit further and add a bit more information to it. Just noticing now we have a question from Julie. Hello, Julie. On the dashboard, can you break down our website into specific pages? We have our blog on our website, so it'd be, yeah, look, Julie, you can go as granular as you kind of want to. We typically, if we're going to post something into, so if we have a blog post, and in that blog post, we want to provide a link for someone to reach an Eloqua landing page. When we build that particular URL in the UTM parameter exercise, I am starting to play around with putting in blog versus just our website, just so I can get a little bit of a difference in relation to the granularity from a reporting point of view. So, but yes, you can be as granular as you want to be. It doesn't have to be fixed to simply being our website. So yeah, absolutely. Great question. Okay, so two particular reports that I started to play with. One is there's a report out of the box called New Contacts by Lead Source Original. Now that is actually an Eloqua construct that you all have. It's a field you all have sitting in your instances that you may or may not use. So I chose that report, and then I've added some custom fields to it. The other one is the Campaign Analysis Overview Report, and again, I've added some custom fields to it. Now that becomes a big gnarly report because when we go from a campaign level, it's just giving you a single line. You know, as you export it to Excel, it's a single line of information. However, once you start to then add contact information, you're then potentially getting every single person in that campaign appearing as a line item in your report. So the report can become pretty gnarly pretty quick. So let's just jump out of that for a moment and let me give you an idea. So this is the report that I've built. So this is, I've gone into the campaign analysis report. I've selected save as, and then I've added other fields to it that I wanted. We'll just focus on the last 14 days in this instance. And then what I've done is you'll see when the report pops up, you'll see lead source information, etc. Now, there are always going to be gaps in this as well. And I suppose that goes back to Trish and Matt earlier, that it's a bit of a constant process to evaluate and look at any of those data anomalies that may be a part of that process. So where you're seeing some gaps, that you've got a way to constantly look at that information and be refining it. Okay, so, so over on the far left-hand side, you can see the campaign name, and that's taken up an entire block there. And then over here, you've got lead source, lead campaign, and lead medium. So for us, you can see for most of it, this is just the last 14 days, but it gets quite busy. You know, Eloqua plays a big role, obviously, in what we do, but you can see it starts to get quite extensive. So the beauty of a dashboard would be then to take some of this information to kind of roll it up, right? And apply those same sort of filters, but rolling it up within the last 14 days, last month, for instance, that sort of stuff. And so you can, now these are all hyperlinked, so you can drill through and see further should you want to. If I go back to the Insight home screen, now just to let you know, building that report took me about 8 minutes. So it's not rocket science. The other one I created was the new contacts one. So again, using the generic report, the out of the box report, and I want to see if we get some decent information here. Let's go back maybe 1 month, go back to 1st of May. Okay, so here what we have is the lead source original, total number of contacts, company name, email address, etc. Now there's obviously some personal information there, so I won't spend too much time on there. But again, you can see a whole range of data flowing through in relation to the lead source, campaign, and medium that is sitting there. So they're just two quick examples of ways that you can find a little bit more information to help you through the process of understanding the data. It's one thing to capture the data, and the next one is to obviously try and find a way to display it that makes sense to everybody. I think, again, that was one of the points that Trish made. Very much an important part of their process was making sure they could get that data and display it to people that could be easily digestible to non-marketing folks. And that was a combination of both Eloqua using to present that data, but also their Oracle Service Cloud and Oracle Sales Cloud as well. So the CRM platforms used within the university to present that information. Alrighty, so what's new and what's coming? So the next release of Eloqua is due on the middle of August, and will be the third release for the year. At this stage, we don't have any details to talk about in relation to that, but as soon as we do, we'll find that information in Topliners in the Eloqua Insiders area. So we'll make sure we get that to you. So we do have some question time, Q&A. Thank you for your questions earlier. If you do have any other questions, or if there's anything that you would like some assistance with, we'd be more than happy to reach out to you, schedule some time one-on-one, and talk through any of those points in a little bit more detail if you like. Kath has raised her hand. Kath says, if you're adding hidden fields to forms for UTM, do you use GA on Eloqua landing pages, and where do you paste the URL? Always use Google Analytics. Actually, that's two questions, sorry. That's from Mohammed and Kath, I got confused. Where do you paste the URL? So the URL that we talked about earlier, so if I go back to that slide with the example, so this one. So once we build out that particular URL, so that's actually one long URL, I just couldn't fit it on the screen. If I fit it at full width, you wouldn't be able to read it. But the idea is that you take that URL, and so it's that URL that I'm pasting specifically onto the website. So I'll have a blog post, for example, and in that blog post, there'll be a button to click here to access the replay. And so I put that URL behind the button on the website that will drive people from our website blog post directly to the Eloqua landing page, which has the form on it, where they can then access the replay. And in those values, the source, medium, and campaign details are pulled through onto the form via the hidden fields and then posted to the contact in that process. So Muhammad asks, do you use Google Analytics on Eloqua landing pages? So Mohammed, Google Analytics is something that you actually add to Eloqua, which your administrator can add. It doesn't have to be added page by page. You actually add your GA profile to your instance of Eloqua as a whole. And so the answer is yes. So when I log into Google Analytics and look at page behavior, I'll also see the Eloqua landing pages stored there and available from GA. Thank you for those questions. Is there anything else that anybody would like to ask? I'm happy to stay on the line for a couple of minutes if there are any particular questions, but if not, I may bid you farewell. So thank you so much for joining us today, guys. We really appreciate your input. Thank you so much for your questions. Big thank you to our friends at Victoria University and to Trish and Matt for putting together that information for us. We appreciate the time you've taken to do that, and I'm sure the rest of the team also appreciate that as well. So have a wonderful week, everybody. We'll see you online next month for the next user group. Cheers, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.